Okay, Legionnaires, for segment 2 today, we're going to start talking about Mage the Ascension. This is going to be mainly first edition Mage, if anyone is wondering. And we are going to talk about how to set up or introduce Mage the Ascension to a new player, whether it be new to Mage, new to World of Darkness at all. Not so much new to any role-playing game. We're not going to go that far into generics, but we are going to talk about how you can start Mage for new players and ease them into this interesting and complex world. That was wrong. That was the wrong one.
The core values of #RPGate and any good tabletop group are escapism, not representation, entertainment over activism, and natural, organic inclusion, not forced diversity. Please follow that QR code or refer to the description below for the link to the charity we support, which is the Wounded Warrior Project. Thursdays and Saturdays, you can watch the Dirty Casuals on twitch.tv/Legion of Myth. Fridays and Sundays, you can watch the Friday Night Chill Stream and RPG Die Gest on our YouTube and Rumble channels. Please leave us a comment with your thoughts and experiences, and if you like our gaming content, please be sure to subscribe to Legion of Myth.
And if you love that super professional opening, then go ahead and like and subscribe. That was great. Now with me is Adam. He is he's been on YouTube for a while now, speaking specifically on Mage Matters. Adam, go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you've done for Mage in particular.
Well, certainly. Actually, I have been involved in podcasting rather than YouTube, but I got kind of grandfathered in because the producer of our podcast started putting our audio recordings up on YouTube in our own channel with a still image. So I'm kind of on YouTube for a while, sort of unofficially. But yes, I am Adam. I live in Austin, Texas. I've been a Mage fan since 1993. I have read all of the Mage books from the earliest to the most recent, and that has helped me to get a perspective on how different people have approached the game over the years, because there are different entry points, and that's why I'm really glad that we have a chance to talk to people about the best way to start with Mage.
Okay, great. Now, I'm going to paint this picture for you, okay, and tell me how you would handle this. You have a group of 5 people. One of them has played Mage before, 2 of them have played other World of Darkness games before, and 3 of them have not played any World of Darkness games before, but have played other role-playing games. How would you introduce Mage in particular, and the World of Darkness in general, to these players and have it make sense and foster a bit of excitement at the same time?
Oh, so this is a storyteller or a game master who knows Mage, because I set up some notes for a game master who was new to Mage himself.
Oh, we'll get to that. Herself. We'll get to that too. But the most common scenario you're going to have is someone who wants to introduce Mage the Ascension to a role playing group. He has played it before and he understands it, and so he's going to be the storyteller.
Okay, so someone who knows the game, someone who knows World of Darkness games, and someone who does not know World of Darkness games, but at least knows what dice are.
Yes. How do you sell it to them?
Well, let's see. I would probably, to be honest, when presented with a question like that, you mentioned to me you had an idea to start off the players all as orphans and let them experience survival on their own and some initial experiences with their magical abilities. And then after they get some experience of surviving on their own and trying to figure things out themselves, then slowly introduce them to the larger factions of Mage. And I was not surprised when you told me that was the way you like to start games, because I have spoken with many Mage fans who like that same approach to it. It has strengths in that you can introduce the central concepts and game terms of Mage the Ascension before you start introducing the different factions and their politics and personalities.
Okay.
And so that gives players a strong foundation.
I want to explain to the viewer the whole faction thing. The orphan is a group of Mage people who are kind of like loosely affiliated, kind of like a group of hermits, right? Who awakened to their ability to alter reality, basically on their own or through some traumatic event, but they are not affiliated with any of the other political factions in the Mage universe as a whole. So you don't have to introduce, interfactionary politics right away to a brand new World of Darkness or a brand new Mage player. You can have them get their feet wet with the mechanics of altering reality, the mechanics of rolling these dice, dice pools and stuff like that. Have them get used to the game generally, and then move on to the more esoteric or high level stuff like political factions or wars between traditions and technocracy, or fight plans or political rivals and stuff like that. You can use that as much as you want, but if you don't introduce it right away, you're helping your characters grow into just being themselves and navigating this world in a more general sense, making it easier for them to transition.
Yeah, and what has helped Mage as a game to appeal to a lot of people over the years is the richness. But that same richness, there's so many different philosophical ideas. There's so many different even genres of literature and entertainment that get thrown into it in different corners. There's so much going on that this richness that makes the game appealing can also make it intimidating to both game masters and players. They start reading through the book and there's so many ideas dropped on them, and it's like, oh gosh, where do I start? How do I do it right? And I have to agree with Ethan Dog's suggestion, which is a common one. Do it in stages, and because that way you can build on what you present to your players. You build up to the richness, and then it can be fully appreciated. If you drop it all at once, it's kind of a mess.
Information overload. Yeah. Okay, so how would you introduce the core basics of this game to new players to World of Darkness? For example, what I would do would be first I would highlight the universe of the World of Darkness. It's basically it's our world, just a little bit darker, a little bit grittier, a little bit less friendly. It's if for the older people, I would say very Tales from the Dark Side, version of our world. And then I would move on from there. Then I would spend a game session highlighting the actual magic and how it works, have them try the mechanics of magic, have them start to understand how the feel of how magic works, stuff like that, and move on from there. What steps do you take that you saw was effective in introducing the world in stages to a new group?
Yeah, one of the ideas of Mage the Ascension is ordinary people who have had ordinary lives up to this point have this very strange experience, and it's called awakening. And it's basically they're able to do and learn magic when they could not before because they were a regular person. And so this idea is something that can be a little difficult for new players because you can do all of these things that you could not before, and say, well, where do I start and how do I make sense of all these rules? And I see this chart, there's 9 different categories of magic, and each one has 5 different levels, and gosh, that's 45. Do I have to learn this all right now? But no, dude, chill. Look, what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to start you out as an orphan who has just awakened. It's like, I don't know anything. Yeah, your character doesn't either. So it's cool.
You're
Let's
on
roll
the
with
same
that.
page. Yeah.
And according to the character creation in all of the editions of Mage, you can spend what they call freebie points. And so you raise your arete, which is how well you understand magic. You start out at 1, that's a gimme, but you can spend your points to go up to 2 or 3. Well, I think it's a good idea as a game master to say, look, let's just put aside the standard book rules for now and say your arete starts at 1, is just going to stay there. And so the powers that you can do, they don't go above level 1. And that's great because most, not all, but most of the level 1 powers are about sensing things. You see things, you hear things, you feel things. Well, what exactly? Well, I'll describe it to you. And then as I do that, you'll get a sense of, oh, hey, if I can see something I couldn't see before, I can probably use that to my advantage. Yes, great. Let's roll with that. And after we get a few game sessions of that, now you can spend experience points, sorry, to raise your arete. And as your arete goes up,
General
you're
magical
able,
knowledge. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
general magical knowledge and ability. Then you can start doing level 2 powers. And that's more than just sensing things. It's starting to mess with stuff. But once you have had some game sessions to know what stuff you're seeing and not seeing, and when you see it and when you don't, makes it easier to start messing with it because you know more about it.
So your thing is to create a glass ceiling in the beginning, like something the players will bump into and have to overcome through experience and knowledge. They're not allowed to increase their magical knowledge because they haven't played yet. Once you start playing, get your feet wet, get used to seeing electrons in the air, get used to seeing ghosts, get used to perfectly sensing time or space or whatever, because that's what one dot in a thing does. And your arete is your maximum number of dots you can have in any specific discipline of magic.
That's part of it.
So,
Yeah, glass ceiling
yeah.
is part of it. It's like I see there's stuff, there's cool stuff to do, but I can't do it. But there's also another side to that, and that is not necessarily a glass ceiling. And that is one of the things that all the editions of Mage the Ascension tries to teach people is in the world of darkness, there are the scheming vampires, there are the really strong werewolves. But what mages are supposed to be is clever. Mm-hmm. They can figure things out. They can, push the buttons that other people don't even know are there. And so when you give people level 1 powers and not higher in terms of mage magic, then what they are learning to do is how do I how can I think intelligently with this ability? I can see the ghosts. I can't do anything else, but I know that they're here and they're not there. How can I use that to my advantage? It's like now you're starting to think of a mage.
Yeah,
when you're thinking like a mage, when you get to the level 2 powers, you're better able to use them intelligently.
Right. Excellent. So you're training your player characters, your new player characters, to get comfortable outside the box. Here's the box. Level 1 lets you peer out of the box. Lets you open the box and see what is outside of everyone else's universe. You can now see it. How do you use that to your advantage? And then with level 2, you can walk out of the box for a minute, do things that no one else can do.
Yeah, until eventually you get up to level 5, then you're picking up the box and knocking other people on the head with it, but you're in good time.
Yeah, you're traveling through time. You're making atomic explosions. You're doing all the level 20 mage things that wizards do in D&D. Maybe not, but yeah, there you go. So okay, so start them off with an artificial limit. I'm gonna say not so much limit, but training wheels. You put training wheels on them for the first couple of adventures until they get the experience points required to level up themselves magically in a significant fashion. But by then, because they've got some games under their belt, they can now handle it naturally. That makes perfect sense. I like that. That makes perfect sense to me. Now, after they've done that, they now have their feet wet. They understand a little bit more how magic works. How do you introduce rotes? Now, I'm going to explain to the people watching what rotes are. Rotes are the melding of 2 different magical disciplines. There are 9 different magical disciplines, and one of them is, say, spirit, and one of them is forces. Spirit is to do with everything that is spiritual, dead people, wraiths, zombies, whatever. And forces is all of the entire electromagnetic spectrum and potential and kinetic energy. That is the forces sphere. Now, a rote uses aspects of both merged together to create an effect that is greater than what both could do separately. How do you introduce that to your characters and kind of explain it to them so they understand? Maybe better than I just did. Hopefully better than I just did.
What a lot of people experience when they first get into role-playing games is something a lot like a fantasy role-playing game. It's like your wizard can learn spells. The spell does this. Oh, okay. Well, I can't do that because I haven't learned that spell. But once I learn that spell, it always works like this. So, okay, that's how it goes. And Mage is interesting because there are 9 categories of magic, and you can mix and match, and you can effectively create your own spells, even on the spot. However, rotes are different. Rotes are a lot like spells, to be honest. A rote is something that a mage did a long time ago. And he said, hey, this works really well. Oh.
You're good. You can keep going. He just has to. He sometimes has to step away for a little
sorry
minor
about that.
emergencies.
Sorry about that. My wife needed to get something. I have this room locked, so no one can just walk in.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. I just wasn't
sorry.
What was up there, but fine.
Dog messing with
you. Get out of here. All right.
Where would I start with that? Okay. Yeah, it's interesting that you bring that up because a lot of people experience role-playing games starting out with the very popular fantasy role-playing games, and they learn about spells. This spell does this thing. If I have learned that spell, I can do that thing, and it always works like this. If I haven't learned the spell, well, I just can't do that. And Mage is different. Mage was written to be a game that was very different, very dynamic. There are 9 categories of magic. You can mix those categories together. You can do new things. You can effectively create your own new magic on the spot. And this is really exciting. It's really interesting. But it's also really hard if you've never done it before, both for players approaching the game and actually for characters in the world of Mage. It is one thing to say, hey, I can do anything. It's like, okay, do anything. Boy, how do I do that? So rotes are something that mages in the game world have built up over time. A long time ago, a mage said, hey, when I do this, this happens. And this is really good. I'm going to write this down, and I'm going to tell the other guys in my mage society or my students in the future, when you do this, this happens. And this is how you know how you're ready to even attempt this. And so rotes are basically like rote memorization. If I do this, exactly this, then exactly this will happen. And so rotes are a great training tool so that mentors, older mages, can train their students, the younger mages. And in the world of Mage, naturally, mentors will teach rotes to their students. But we just told you, hey, we're talking about orphans, people who don't have a Mage society they belong to. They don't have a mentor. How do they get rotes? Well, actually, mages write special books, like you could say mage-only books, and they pass them to each other. And so when a sleeper is a non-mage, a regular person, when a regular person gets this book, they read through it and they say, this doesn't make any sense. It's either a mistranslation or it was written by a crazy man. I'm going to throw this over my shoulder, go read a good book. But when a mage gets a mage-only book, they read through it and they say, hey, I think I understand this.
That's a good idea.
Let me try this. Yeah. And if you have the right mage powers on your character sheet, then you can attempt it. And if you have Spirit 0 and it's a Spirit 2 rote, well, of course you can't do it.
You got some work to do if you want to do this. Yeah, I always tell my player characters to think less of rote as a spell. Think of it as a recipe.
Well, that is how mentors will train their students well. They will start them by teaching a rote, and the student says,
"Oh yeah,
hey, I did it like you said, and it worked like you said. This is great." And
exactly,
says,
and
okay,
that's exactly how a recipe works. If you add this much flour, this much egg, this much butter, you get a cake, right? And if it's replicable 100% of the time, if you have the ingredients, which is the level of power in each of these specific areas, then you will get this fully replicable result every single time.
Yeah, so that is a good starting point. But then after that, the mentor wants the student to understand, okay, you did the recipe, that's good. Now go beyond the recipe.
Jigger the recipe, change it up a little bit. And I think he's frozen. Change the recipe up a little bit, and you'll get a different result. It's kind of like once you get to be good at an instrument, playing around the music can give you a different melody. Playing around with the rote, changing the perhaps not the ingredients, but the amount of ingredients will give you a different result. It'll give you a more chewy cookie. It'll give you a more cakey cookie. It'll give you a brownie, stuff like that. And this helps the player characters think again outside the box. That's what Mage is. It's a lot of outside the box thinking, and help them make their own recipes, make their own rotes later on. Oh, it looks like Adam had to drop out for a second because his connection was getting bad, which is understandable. He told us in the beginning that might happen. But so that right there is Adam and my's take on how to get new players, get their feet wet, get them in the game in stages. And in our next segment, we're going to talk about the thing we glossed over a little bit here, which are faction politics. How to introduce faction politics when you think your players are finally ready, and and what to do if they hit stumbling blocks and they push back, stuff like that. There he is. He's back.
Sorry, my internet cut. It's yeah.
That's entirely fine. We are done with this one, and we are going to go at some of the starred comment here, which is Max. He was watching. It says 1 dot in time equals read a clock with hands. Now that is him making fun of children nowadays not being able to read an analog clock. So apparently, if you can read an analog clock, you have magic. But no, the idea of 1 dot is either a complete sense of what it is or a complete sense of what is going on with that aspect of reality. So 1 dot in time means you have a perfect sense of time. You know exactly how much time passes between this moment and that moment, even if you're asleep, even if you're distracted. You know, a watched pot never boils, not for you. You know exactly how much time has passed, even if you weren't paying attention for a few minutes. And it allows you to see and sense anomalies in time. Usually this is higher level people doing higher level time magic. You can sense the ripples of that, whereas no one else without any dots of time could.
Yeah, there can be a lot of fun scenes where you are starting to teach your players about the 9 spheres of magic, the 9 categories of magic, where you can you say your play. You notice it isn't the right time. It's like, oh, well, what? My clock's wrong? No, your clock's fine. It's just the time is messed up. What do you mean time is messed up? It's like it's the time stream is not flowing right in this area where you're standing. Oh, what's up? Well, you don't know, but something is up. And they're like, oh, wow, there's all these things happening in this world that I didn't even know of before. Yes, now you're becoming a mage.
There it is. And then we have Rex Teal saying, so magic acts sort of like a science in some ways. Yes. In some ways, I would say yes. It has predictable results if you use, you know, the certain same impetus, like the recipe thing. If you use the same ingredients, cook it for the same time, then you will get the same result. You know, there are exceptions, obviously. There are exceptions to the rule, but as a rule, you get the same result. So if it's replicable, if it's reliable, you can say it's less random magic and more science. I get where you're going with this. It's science in that way. In the way where you can do the same thing over and over again and get the same result over and over again, so it's reliable.
Role-playing games have rules, and the players use those rules, and that allows them to build up certain expectations about things. But also, in the world of Mage, things don't always necessarily happen the same way, because you go to this one place, and the environment is such that, oh, my spell works. Of course it works. You go to another place, my spell doesn't work. What went wrong? Well, the environment you're in, there are different factors, and so it's not like your wristwatch works everywhere you walk around. You know, in the country, in the city, yeah, it's all fine. Yeah, well, okay, but spirit magic, downtown New York, you know, the Appalachian Hills, it actually works differently, and it's not you; it's the place where you're standing. And so, in that way, it's not exactly the way we think of science. And of course, in the world of Mage, there are some mages who really do.
Really believe it's like science. You know, we're going to get to that in our next segment with faction politics. But as a spoiler, the technocracy as a whole and the Sons of Ether, the virtual adepts, they believe that that science is the mundane version of magic. It's the same. It's just replicable by people who can't use magic, but still, it's based in a kind of magic. So that's what they believe, and that's how it works for them. But again, that's a spoiler for next one. But that is that all we have for well, we have Kokoshuko saying hypothesis, observation, variable, conclusion. Yeah, that for the most part, magic, for the person who understands it, has the dots in it to perform a certain effect. You will test it, you will try it, you will succeed, you will replicate it to make sure it's replicable, and then now it is a fact. In your library, you have this little bullet in your gun, this piece of your arsenal that you can use for the most part everywhere all the time, and you can count on it.
Yeah, and
for the most part. There's always exceptions, but for the most part.
And yeah, actually, this is a good point to bring up one of the basic concepts of, like Rex Steele says, magic acts like science until it doesn't, and that leads into the point I was going to make, and that is you learn how to do something with magic, and you say, ah, this is how it works. Now I understand magic. And then you meet another mage, and he does it all wrong, but he gets this better result than you did. It's like, wait a minute, I thought I had this figured out. You thought you did, but there's always more to it.
This is all Obi-Wan stuff. We're going to find, especially in the next section, we go faction politics. It all depends on your point of view.
But even without the factions involved, one of the concepts of Mage is people fall into a rut and they say, aha, I've got it figured out, but there's always more you don't know. And
there's always another way to attack the problem.
Yeah. And if you can do something to keep yourself out of the ruts, you're going to do better as a mage, just generally speaking.
Keep your mind open. Just because this works for you doesn't mean it'll work for somebody else, or doesn't mean somebody else can do it better in a different way. Just keep your mind open. There's all kinds of ways to do things. All right. So that's going to be it for this segment. Our next segment, check us out in a minute. If you're here, if not, you got to wait a day or two, but we are going to talk about how to introduce the almost integral to the game concept of faction politics. And until then, thank you very much, and like and subscribe.